Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
This is Awake, O Israel Ministries.
Awesome.
We do thank and praise the Most High.
Shalom.
Ahayah, bahashem, Yashayah, this opportunity to be on here in front of you today. I want to talk about tonight for the Sabbath, continuing our series, talking about the America's racial, system, explained. So America has a long history, some would say a rich history of racial oppression of many different many people, but specifically blacks and Latinos, because those are the people that America was built off of. Really, white people really didn't build America. They tried, but they figured out we couldn't, so we'll genocide half the majority of the people that were here, and we'll go over to Africa and somehow just fall upon black people. That's the story they give us. Well, we know that they didn't just discover black people in Africa. They knew who they were catching and putting on. They knew the race.
Slave ships. Finish your statement.
They knew who they were putting on the slave ships. They knew who they were catching.
No, you don't care.
They knew that the nationality of the people. They knew that they were the children of Jacob.
That's right.
They knew they were the Israelites. So that is why they have changed their names so much, their racial name, from so many different names. Now they call them African American. That's the most modern name switch they've had committed against these people. Right?
That's right. Come on.
Excuse me. So, and why is this? The Bible says that there's nothing under heaven befallen anybody like it's befallen the children of Israel in Daniel.
That's right.
Daniel 9.
That's right. Absolutely.
So we understand that the Israelites, in America, we know that what African Americans, I'll use that term as a term we all can associate with, have suffered the greatest oppression as a group. Them and then the Hispanics, so-called Hispanics, because they are the same nation. They are the same people. They have the same fathers.
That's right.
Their fathers are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They are the biblical Israelites.
That's right.
That is why they have suffered the greatest oppression in American history. And that is why the system works so hard to keep them a part of it. Because without them in it, the system would collapse and would be non-existent. Before we go into a little of this information I have prepared, I want to go to scripture. Let's go to the Apocrypha.
Where, Joshua? Where, brother?
Uh,
What book?
I want the book of Sirach.
I'm right in there. What chapter? Chapter.
Sirach chapter 38, 34. Sirach 38 and 34, everybody.
Okay.
Uh,
$38, $34, right? You got it, Ray? You want me to read it? Huh? You sure? All right, 34. But they will, right? But they will maintain the state of the world.
So, and exactly that's the condition or position they want them in. They want them to think their whole purpose in life is to serve and be and build their kingdom. That's why they allow you in the military. That's why they give you position in sports. Not saying that you're not talented, but the overall agenda is they need you, so-called African American, to serve them. They need you to sustain them, because without you,
They can't. That's right.
they would have no world.
And all their desire is in the work of their craft.
So they will train you to think of yourself only as what they train you to be. Right? An athlete, a military, whatever.
Right. They get billions and you get millions.
And
half these ball players never see their money anyway. They're shipped off to another team, another contract, another slave trade. Another plantation. Just a modern slave thing. Modernized. Correct?
Yeah.
And they are great athletes. They're great athletes. Great athletes.
But that's not all you are.
Right.
Okay, now I want to go into Psalms 83.
Yeah, make it read that.
So I went there to show you the overall agenda of how they want the Israelites, the Negroes, and Latinos to see themselves as a building block. But yet, it's strange how they use them to build their kingdom, but they don't give them any real individuality in their kingdom. They don't allow them to have their own expression of self. Hold on.
You and Josh can read it. Tony, if you want to. What do you think, Tony? Fans in every room?
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
I can buy them cheap. I got to find a good electrician that'll do it. Won't charge us too much.
Psalms chapter 83 and verse 2.
Go ahead, Mary.
For lo, thy enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up their hand.
So Satan is the main enemy of the Most High. But Satan knows that he can't harm the Most High physically. But he can harm the nation that God chose, the race that God chose to be his own.
That's right.
They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, against thy people, not all people, to show you not all people are hated in this world as a race of people. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people. What is a crafty counsel? A crafty counsel is a hidden agenda, a hidden counsel that no one sees, but it's evident in the way the culture or the nation is ran or programmed. So it's seen, but yet it's unseen. Right?
Mhm.
You know it's there, but you can't explain why. Right?
Uh-huh.
Come on now.
So against
Thy hidden ones. So how do they consult against thy hidden ones? By setting up a system from slavery that will condition the system to rule over God's chosen people.
That's right. Absolutely.
They have said.
They have what?
They have said, "Come and let us cut them off from being a nation."
Cut them off from being a nation, right?
That the name.
That the what?
The name of Israel
Mm-hmm.
may be no more in remembrance.
So
they want to cut their name off forever. And
they want you.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want you knowing who you are.
That's right.
They want your sense of nationhood to get it from them.
That's right.
That's why they can't determine what they want to call you. That's why they called you multiple things. They called you black, Negro, colored, African. They called
all bywords. Coon, migrant, all this.
They've called you at least 4 or 5 different titles since you came here. Okay?
And they still won't tell you who you are.
So those titles they put on you aren't identities. They are titles. They are titles that they want you to see yourself as.
That's right.
So you never see yourself as something they didn't give you.
That's right. You can rise out of those lies.
For they have consulted they have consulted together with one consent. With one consent. So consult together with one consent. What does this mean? That Satan understands, and the people that work under Satan understand that they must be together in one mindset. That's why they want all races, right? They want, listen to this, everybody, not only Israel, but see, it's aimed at Israel, but they want all races at each other's neck.
That's right.
Because through everyone being divided, no one can find the answer.
There you go.
But it's aimed at Israel, but everybody becomes
going
part of the shotgun barrel.
They're in the scheme of the thing,
right?
Of the game. Yeah.
So, because then, if let's just say Caucasians, most white people don't understand why black people are looked at the way they are in America, or they believe they are. So they have these false ideas based on the media, based on what they see, and that instills in them a sense of supremacy,
insecurity,
entitlement. So they feel like they know the answer that to so they'll tell black people you're unorganized, you're uncivil, when they don't understand it's programmed. The people that run this country have an agenda to keep them ununited.
That's right. Come on.
That's why when you go into the Muslim community, you have one mosque. When you go into a white community, mainly you have one church. Whatever, it could be Lutheran or it could be a Baptist church, but you have basically one religious system. You go into a Jewish community, you have one synagogue and a Hebrew academy.
Mm-hmm.
You go into a Hindu community and you have a Hindu temple. You don't have multiple Hindu temples. But you go into the Black and Latino communities and you have churches all in the same block on top of each other, showing you the system wants them religiously divided and confused.
That's right.
Otherwise, all communities would be separated like that, because it's not. Because because these community, the system above us understands that to rule you must be united. So they want all races to dominate over Israel.
A nation divided.
Right.
Cannot stand.
What did Christ say? A kingdom against each other cannot stand, and a house divided will not stand.
That's right.
If Satan casts out Satan, how can he stand?
There you go.
So Satan knows he can't cast himself out. He can't. How can I say this? No, it was really good what I was about to say. Satan can't cast out Satan. So anything in this system, Satan will control. Mm-hmm. Anything mainstream, Satan runs it.
That's it.
Because because he's afraid of the people of the Most High awakening to the truth. So they consult together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacle of Edom and the Ishmaelites. Who is Esau and who is Ishmael? The Arabs and the so-called white man, the elite white, the European Jewish aristocracy.
And the Moabite, Moab, and the Hagarenes.
Watch verse 11.
Which one?
Verse 10 and 11.
Which perished at Endor, they became as done for the earth.
Read.
Make them nobles like Oprah and like Zebra.
Stop. Verse 12. Who said, let us
take to ourselves the houses of Ahayah in
possession. So again, so the idea is, how can we take God's people into possession? We must take their nationality, give them alter egos to call themselves, and have a secret confederacy that we never tell no one about, but we know this is how we run our world. So we can permanently control these people by the majority if we maintain this collective agenda against the Israelites. We will always rule this earth if we can keep these people by the majority separated. Mm-hmm. And we will possess them, and we will continue to use them as commodities to build our world.
Josh, I mentioned the sport industry, how they're under guidelines and certain things they can't say. That's even a slave camp. the sports arenas. And there's a lot of them, right, Josh, that know who they are in there, but they can't speak it.
So we understand that through slavery, a lot of black people have a sense of inferiority, or what is called self-hatred or self-hate. Hatred directed at oneself rather than toward others. Makes you anti-social. It's so we understand that through slavery, that conditioning that the Israelites received through slavery has caused a type of self-hate to recede in them, to stay within them, so that they are unable to identify with themselves.
That's right. That's it.
And that's why a lack of identity, knowing who you are, comes from that, or is a root of that, because a slave master has to instill self-hatred within you, and he does that through taking your identity from you, so then he can make you unstable and continually give you different titles to go by, so you don't know what you are. So in that is also makes you have a type of hatred for yourself, because not knowing who you are, you will always try to go into something to find identity. And since you don't have a real identity, you go through the world compasslessness, or without a sense of direction. The Israelites, the so-called Negroes, lean on the master's religion of Christianity because they feel like Christianity has been a outlet for them to get away from oppression. Because during slavery, and I want to share some information about segregation.
Those like him. Those like him.
So we understand that the Most High spoke through his prophets that there would be a political agenda against his people, that the nations headed by Esau and Ishmael. And why? Ishmael was rejected by Isaac, and Ishmael was rejected by Abram, and Isaac was rejected. Esau was rejected by his father. So through their deal, so the way they deal with their spirit of rejection is they have to annihilate their brother Jacob. They have to wage a war against Jacob. So they come together, mainly those two and all the other races of the earth, against the Israelites. And it's been going on since the book of Genesis. Talk about a family feud, right, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
That's a historic family feud.
That's right, absolutely.
That's the root of wars.
Right, their agenda is to keep them.
That's the root of all the unrest. Jacob, Esau, and Ishmael trying to annihilate their brother Jacob.
Josh, that's That's the one question I use. No, I don't try to stump them when I meet them, Tony.
Yeah.
When I go up to them, I tell them this. I go, knowing who you are, and that bothers them. It really bothers them.
Because they really don't know.
Okay? And they get a little upset.
So I want to
Knowing who-
read some of this here. After I read some of this, before I read this, I want to go to Luke 21. Luke, the 21st chapter.
Luke 21:20.
So
And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. And who were these armies? Esau, the Romans.
Mhm. Come on.
Just like we read in Psalms 83.
Hold on. I want to say something. Now, when I was a Christian, being taught in Christian church, that they always told us that was a future event. No, that happened in Christ's time, Yash's time, Yashayah's time.
And then let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. So if you look at a map of the ancient land of Israel, or a world map, you'll see that the only place that Christ could have been referring to is Africa.
That's right.
The west coast or the coast of Africa.
Come on.
So what happened was the Israelites would run into Africa, then, or North Africa, or towards Northwest Africa. Then they would filter down through and end up in like Nigeria, Gambia, Niger, Benin,
Libya.
Angola, and different areas, but mainly in the west coast of Africa. They would end up. Ivory Coast, Slave Coast, and Gold Coast is where they would end up.
They actually call it Negro Land, didn't
Negro Land.
Negro Land.
So the mountains that Christ referred to, brothers and sisters, is in Africa. Verse 24 says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive. What is a captive? A slave. So what people were led away slaves recently? The Negroes out of Africa.
That's right.
Letting you know that even Christ said that would happen. Led away captive into all nations. The transatlantic slave trade is Bible prophecy. Even Christ gave a prophecy that his people would still be enslaved. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, meaning completed. And who are the Gentiles? The Gentiles are the European Khazar Jewish people. Esau, claiming to be his brother Jacob, and he is a lie, right? He is a liar, but he is a synagogue of Satan.
Shalom, brother. Right.
So, segregation. I want to talk about segregation a little bit. Segregation, the separation of racial groups in aspects of daily life in the history of the United States, from most of the United States history, segregation maintained a segregation of African Americans or Israelites from white people, and we know that's true. That's the way it's been throughout history, throughout American history, right? And they want you to believe that this has changed. That since Martin Luther King came around, he integrated everybody. No, well, when you really think about it, how did we get the ghetto really in America? If you research something called redlining, and what redlining was is in the 30s they created a system where you could separate blacks and whites and redline property and give the better property to the white wealthy people, and that would knock down the prices in the black neighborhoods, and that would eventually create what we know as the white middle class. And you can research that for your own self. And we know that segregation existed in all aspects of America, in the military, in sports. See, and they want you to believe that you can't have success without them. That's why they want you to believe that segregation was so bad. Segregation wasn't really bad. It's just they couldn't prosper off of you as much or as little as they could if you're segregated or not having them in your daily life and running your and that's evident today because you see all races, all peoples go into black neighborhoods and make money off of them. Black people and the Israelite community does not control. Black people don't control their own community. Gas stations are owned by them. Mostly everything in the black community now isn't owned by. The majority of it is not owned by the people who live in the community. It's owned by people who don't live there. Just want to share. Okay. I just want to read these two segments here. Oh, that's good. I might look at that. I'll try to read these two really quickly. Segregation in the South. Congress passed a Reconstruction Act of 1867, the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, 1870, providing the right of right to vote, and Civil Rights Act of 1876, 75. Forbidding racial segregation in accommodations as a result of federal oper, op, operations troop in the South South arrested blacks, assisted blacks to blacks the right to vote in and to elect their own leaders. That's very key. Black people under segregation directly after slavery had the right to elect their own leaders over them in their own community. So they weren't trying to be quote unquote necessarily equal yet. They wanted to build their own communities after slavery. So they wanted self-government, basically. They wanted their own leaders, their own everything, right? The Reconstruction amendments asserted the supremacy of the national, state, and federal equality under the law of everyone white within it. However, it did not prohibit segregation in schools. So we understand that eventually they would have they would end up unsegregating schools, when that wasn't really an issue because black people could learn amongst their own. See, the whole civil rights movement made a big deal out of something that wasn't really a big deal, because black people had their own schools taught by black teachers, so they didn't need to be integrated. And I'm not saying it's wrong to go to school with other people, but what I'm saying is, to integrate, communism is what that whole civil rights movement was, the destruction of society to try to build something better when it never worked. When the Republicans came to power in the South, in the southern states after 1867, they created the first system of taxpayer funded public schools. Southern blacks wanted public schools for their children, but they did not desert racially. They did not demand racially integrated schools. So even black people didn't want integration. So just because Martin Luther King, right, and a few black people got together in the 60s, they wanted you to think that was the whole mindset of black people since slavery ended. Boy, we can't live amongst each other, so we have to be with under the government. Not so much around other people, but we need the government to take care of us instead of taking care of one another. Right? So demanded racially integrated schools almost at the new public schools were segregated apart from a few in New Orleans after the Republicans had lost power in the mid 1870s. Conservative whites retained the public school system, but sharply out what sharply out their conservative whites retained the public school system but sharply cut their spending. So basically, they didn't want black people learning. So that's how they started to cut the funding to certain areas. That's why schools, even today, in certain areas are bad educationally. Mainly in minority areas, you'll have much less schools that are high on a scale of education grades. You'll have usually the worst schools in the black areas and the better schools in the white areas. Why? Because they still are afraid of black people having education, but more importantly, they're afraid of black people reading and being literate enough to use to read the Bible. Because I'll read the rest of this later. Now next lesson. Okay, we're back. So, as we see, brothers and sisters, segregation was not really bad, because think about it like this: when you're separated from everyone else, you have no other option but to work together and build communities with each other. See, they want you to see segregation as so bad that you want so much to be not with one another but under them.
That's right.
So that's that whole, crab in the barrel, I'm better off climbing above you mentality. So we use the law and certain things to permanently bring down black people, the Israelites. Again, like I mentioned with redlining, that's how the whole white upper middle class got built. Because once you send the HOA, the homeowners set up that, and you jack the prices up and give the better land with all the better amenities to it to white people, that's going to drop and bring the prices of the other people, the minorities, so-called minorities, down, and actually they're going to end up getting worse land. That's why the ghettos are so horribly, the land is so bad because that's what happened through redlining. They got the worst land to build on. That's why you see more rodents and rats and all that stuff in the ghetto, is because naturally when you have decaying structure or bad land, it's gonna attract vermin to it. So that is what they are faced with, a system that is consistently rebuilding itself to be oppressed and to keep them oppressed, to keep them beneath, to keep them perpetually under control. Segregation, brothers and sisters, was not evil. Segregation was really what brought black people together after slavery. As you see, that they were seeking representation. They were seeking people out to represent, to former slaves seeking out other people who understood them, who were for them. Now, they may not have understood other things, but still, they were seeking to build a community for each other. They weren't trying to get away from one another and be one with the white or the government, because they understood the government wasn't for them. I'll say that again. Slaves understood that the government was not for them back then, after slavery. See, it's really not been 100 years. Over 100 years ain't long. 150 or 160 years since the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
Which ain't long. But see, through time, they use all these things to make you feel like, that's why people think so negatively about, and see, they use the Ku Klux Klan as the reason that segregation was evil. Segregation overall was not bad. Although, you had persecution of, lynchings and all that, and which was bad. But overall, black people were together and they dealt with it. They grew stronger through oppression. And actually, oppression brings you together.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think you're free and you don't need your brother or sister, you will naturally separate or segregate yourself, and you can't solve the problem like that. You have to unite under the Most High and understand the reason. You are the Israelites, right? This is a system programmed to always oppress and separate. So you have to be able to come together with one another and understand this truth under Christ, right? Again, we have the negative view of segregation because they overly focus on the Klan. In every movie about the civil rights movement, it's always the Klan. They don't show black people prospering under segregation. They don't show that black people had organization. They had their own cities. They had their own businesses. They had their own everything. Why? Because they want you to see, they don't want you to see that was a positive. That oppression brings you together. That it unites. It begins to mold and glue you together as a people. They want you to think that being under unsegregation and having them rule over you is good. Where they have they control your women, most of the black women, with welfare. and I'm not saying everyone on welfare doesn't need it, but they use the system or the different things to control you after segregation. The crime rate, the arrest rate went up. There's more black people in jail now than there was at that time. Right? There's higher drug rates because in your communities, because when you don't run your communities, other people will, and they have an agenda against you.
That's it.
More black families were birthing babies. They weren't aborting children, mainly because the men were always in the home, running the home. You use the, see, so Lyndon Johnson and after that, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon used the civil rights movement as an alleyway to fill the prisons with young black men. Because after the civil rights movement happened, you started seeing drugs in the black community, police, and hire more often, right? More readily, and through that, the war on drugs or the war on Israelites started or ramped up. Now they had a legal right to oppress you. Through you believing you're free and you don't need your brother, they now could use anything if they can think of as a way to keep that unity away from you. So that is, it's an ongoing system, brother. It's never ended. And it will operate whether you believe it operates or not. I'll say that again. This system will operate whether you believe it's there or not. It doesn't matter. So the answer to get out of this is believe in the truth that is written of in the Bible.
That's right.
You are the Israelites spoken of in the Bible.
Amen.
It's time to take claim of your book.
That's right.
Your covenant, and as a people come together under Christ and direct the other nations to follow the Messiah. And that is the answer that will solve the problems that you see in the community. Right? That is the overall answer. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.